Hundreds of years before Tanjiro's story begins, a long-haired swordsman shakes the world with his unmatched talent and feats. He becomes a legend for humans he saves and a nightmare to any demon who crosses his path. That's right, today we'll be looking at the one swordsman who can never be outdone, Yoriichi Tsugikuni, and his tumultuous life. During the Sengoku period, Yoriichi and his older brother Michikatsu came into the world. As twins, their birth was seen as a bad omen, especially for that time period. At the very least, having twins meant more mouths to feed and more costs to cover. His father wanted to kill him because of his strange birthmark, but his mother stopped him. His father allowed him to stay until he would turn 10 years old and be sent to a temple. His older brother was seen as gifted and more valuable, so Yoriichi was treated less well. He ate poorly, had less amenities, and a smaller room in the corner of their home. His parents thought he was deaf since he also wasn't speaking. His mother made him the infamous Hanafuda earrings as a charm to bless him with speech. She prayed the sun god would allow him to hear. Because of how close he was with his mother, he always stayed at her side, almost seeming to cling to her. But that was because his family didn't understand the world the way that he saw it. The day after Michikatsu was hit for being kind to Yoriichi, his brother gave him a flute that he kept close to him. It was meant to connect them in case Yoriichi ever needed his brother's help. Still assumed to be mute, at the age of 7, Yoriichi finally spoke to his brother and said that he also wanted to be a swordsman after watching him practice. That was also the first time Yoriichi smiled. Michikatsu dismissed him, knowing it wasn't that simple, and also he'd be sent away soon. But the teacher there allowed it to humor Yoriichi. Keep in mind, his brother trained for years to be a swordsman. Even so, Yoriichi struck the instructor 4 times and knocked him down, with no knowledge of fighting besides the breathing technique he learned himself. But Yoriichi didn't like the effect the aggression had on people. When his brother asked for advice on how to improve, he gave him anatomy hints to take down enemies. And he even explained the way he sees through people and into the invisible world. In essence, he created the first breathing style simply from intuition. His newly discovered talent with the sword surprised the adults and created a tension with his brother, who envied his talent. His brother felt enraged and annoyed that his natural gifts weren't important to him. Yoriichi constantly surpassed him, no matter what he did. If that wasn't enough, Yoriichi was now treated with care, and Michikatsu was abandoned to the bad part of the house and mistreated. Then, their mother died. This meant that the age of 10 didn't matter anymore. She wasn't there to stop their father from sending one of them away, and since Yoriichi didn't want to use the blade, finding it both easy and joyless for him. He wanted a peaceful, happy life with family that he loves. So he left their home as planned, bidding his brother farewell and taking the carved flute with him. He wrapped it in a cloth, treating it like a precious jewel, and smiled again before bowing and going on his path. Yoriichi knew that now that his brother had been discovered, his older brother would have been sent away in his place. It had been written in his mother's diary, and he didn't want that, so he left to avoid that happening. Likewise, he knew of his mother's illness because of being able to see through bodies, and that's why he always held her left side, not to cling, but to support her. Finding all these things out only made Michikatsu more angry. Except, Yoriichi didn't go to the temple as planned. While traveling, having run a whole day with no need to even take a break, Yoriichi met a girl whose family was killed, and he escorted her home to help with her loneliness. Uta was kind and grounded him, so they fell in love. They got married 10 years later, and one day when he was rushing to get a doctor for his wife about to give birth, he returned to find her and his unborn child killed by demons. This was because he'd stopped on the way to help an elderly man and lost track of time. He had promised to come back before the sun was down. For 10 days he mourned her, holding her body and grieving to no end. He only buried her after a demon slayer in the area told him that it would be best to put his loved ones to rest properly. That slayer looked very much like a Rengoku family ancestor, by the way. There was nothing left for him there, so he decided to use his swordsmanship to take down demons. It was only natural at this point. He had gained the anger and pain needed to finally use in his blade skills. Yoriichi went into demon killing training and far surpassed everyone with his talent for the blade, as expected. At one point, he even came across a camp that had been slaughtered by a demon. Once he found it, he killed the monster easily. Funnily enough, his brother became the only survivor, since it was his group that had been stationed there. Would it be a happy reunion though? Well, let's take a moment to go over why Yoriichi can't be beat when it comes to demon slaying first. Besides the obvious fact that Yoriichi could perform breathing techniques naturally, since he did so at a very young age, this made him a prodigy in terms of understanding the body and what certain actions would produce. Seeing that his style of fighting, in spite of being the most efficient, wasn't easy for everyone to understand. So he created the offshoots we all know and love, and inspired his students to create their own from those afterwards. I won't get into the details now since we'll be touching on the style shortly, but as far as breathing techniques and fighting, even centuries later, Yoriichi remains unsurpassed. Sun Breathing's 13th form was created specifically to take down Muzan. If you consider that some demon slayers can't even master the regular forms, the fact that Yoriichi thought performing 12 back-to-back was possible just further demonstrates his mastery of hunting demons. Would a demonized Tanjiro with all of Muzan's gifts and none of his weaknesses even be a threat to Yoriichi? Well, who can say? The man basically never faced anyone he couldn't take down. I'm sure he could have welcomed the challenge. But anyway, besides sun breathing, even Yoriichi's base stats are godly. He has unmatched levels of speed, agility, reflexes, stamina, and of course, endurance. To be able to run non-stop for 24 hours as a child just proves what kind of monster he was. Not to mention when he faced Kokushibo in his 80s, he still had the same speed and technique he did in his youth. Unlike other slayers, Yoriichi was born with the mark, so there was no need for him to train to bring it out. He was born with that cheat code. Along with that, he figured out how to see through the world and living bodies, the transparent world as it's often called. Also, most likely because of his disdain for violence towards people and having to battle, he naturally figured out how to use the selfless state. More specifically, if you don't want to hurt someone but have to, you wouldn't have any strong emotions, right? This is probably how erasing his presence was second nature to him. Sure, demons killed his family, but not all demons. And not all of them wanted that life, like Tamayo. Oh, and there's also the way that he can turn his blade red without needing to be on the verge of death or overexerting himself. Yoriichi really had no peers and could not understand the struggles of younger demon slayers. It was all just so easy for him. That's also how it goes for the ones who are chosen for a purpose, but would rather be enjoying an easy life. If that wasn't enough, Yoriichi could easily differentiate humans from demons, and even the ranks of the threats he was pursuing from a distance. Also, without ever knowing what Muzan looked or smelled like, he could tell that he was the progenitor. Now let's return to what Yoriichi was doing during his demon slaying days. He tried to teach the slayers there how to use sun breathing, but they all struggled to emulate it accurately. Seeing this, he decided to make offshoots to accommodate them. He created the wind, water, and flame, stone, and thunder at first. The users who mastered these styles were named Hashira, with Yoriichi not even being ranked one himself, even though he taught and invented all of these things. Even so, he wasn't worried about the future of breathing techniques because he had faith that the future generations would thrive even after his death. His twin brother also failed to learn sun breathing and created his own style called moon breathing. But all of Yoriichi's students did gain the mark to grant them even further fighting abilities, including his brother. This also meant in exchange for gaining even a fraction of Yoriichi's gifts, they lost years of their life, dying by the age of 25. Along his travels, Yoriichi met a couple and befriended them. He held them dear even though he couldn't see them often. Their names were Sumiyoshi and Suyako Kamado. That's right, they were Tanjiro's ancestors, who he saved from being killed by demons. Though he wasn't a regular visitor, they were grateful to him because they were able to have a child since they survived. Though Sumiyoshi was a charcoal salesman, He insisted on sharing Yoriichi's life and his children and grandchildren to ensure his story passed on. But Yoriichi said that it wasn't necessary, since all lives end the same way. Even though he's the greatest slayer to ever live, he doesn't feel like that's important. Every life is important, and his is just one of many. He doesn't feel special in any way, and it's mainly because, with all of his power and talent, he wasn't able to save his most cherished loved ones. When his sword skills would have mattered the most, he failed. And to be fair, there's another instance when that happens. So yeah, Yoriichi wasn't weak, but he wasn't perfect either. Faced with the father of all demons, the ultimate devil, Yoriichi doesn't bat an eye. In fact, he's immediately ready and sure that he will completely obliterate him. It seems like big talk, especially since Muzan looks down on breathing techniques, but he's never been faced with sun breathing, that's for sure. Yoriichi, with his amazing battle insight and speed, figures out the perfect spots to attack the Demon King. He may have 7 hearts and 5 brains that can be moved around freely, but that means nothing in the face of absolute killing skills. With barely any effort, Yoriichi nearly killed Muzan and implanted a trauma in him due to his fighting prowess and the permanent scars he couldn't heal. Every strike destroyed a key part of Muzan's body, leaving him with no way to fight back. And yet, Muzan didn't die. Let me rephrase. He only survived because Yoriichi lost 300 parts of his body when Muzan cleverly split himself into 1,500 tiny pieces as a last-ditch effort. Those few hundred parts were too small to track, but together they were enough to form a blob the size of a head. So, again, when it mattered the most, Yoriichi didn't succeed. Was it because he never faced challenges that risked his life? Was the lack of physical loss, or having so many blessings, causing him to underestimate threats? But I digress. Afterwards, he was going to deal with the female demon that was with Muzan at the time. Her name was Tamayo. Yes, the same one that works with Tanjiro to combat demons. At the time, she was crying and upset that Muzan had escaped without dying. She cursed him and was surprised that his control over her hadn't killed her from speaking ill of him. If you recall, other demons would be massacred just for uttering his name. Lucky for Tamayo, Muzan was too weakened by Yoriichi's non-stop attack, so the curse couldn't finish her off. She knew then that Muzan would never want to face Yoriichi again, knowing he couldn't win against him. So even though Yoriichi didn't end Muzan, Tamayo survived to help take him down in the future. As if that event wasn't bad enough, Yoriichi receives a report about his brother's betrayal of the Demon Slayer Corps. As a relative and likely the one who recommended him to the organization, Yoriichi was blamed for it. That, along with not taking down Muzan and letting a demon go free without any evidence that she could be trusted, got Yoriichi in hot water. Normally, he would have been immediately executed for those actions, but due to his skills, his strength of character, and his contributions, he got banished instead. It probably didn't hurt that the new master of the corps was a young man who'd just lost his father, and had sentimentality in his mind. Why end another life when you're still grieving over someone precious to you? With Muzan temporarily gone and a forced vacation, Yoriichi went to see his friends. While there, the discouraged Slayer told them everything that had happened in his life, from losing the only parent that cared for him to mourning a family he never got to appreciate. Yoriichi seemed to only feel regret for most of his life. It only became harder to bear when he considered his only living relative had now turned into the thing that he hunted. A twin, no less. But as he sat in silence, his friend unable to console him, a young girl demanded his attention. Her bright and innocent smile was enough to make him start crying, perhaps imagining the tranquil life he could have had. He held her close, sobbing onto the young child's clothes. Later, when he calmed down, Suyako asked him to perform the sun-breathing moves for them. For the family, it was more than entertainment, though. Sumiyoshi made sure to remember them all while watching closely. He had to because Yoriichi had no one left to pass his technique to. Yoriichi didn't tell them, but this was his final visit. Sumiyoshi understood by the way he looked at them, sad and distant already. To show his appreciation for the family, Yoriichi gave them his precious Hanafuda earrings, the only memento of his mother. When he left their home, he still killed demons and visited the Hashira that he was friends with permission, and the Demon Slayer Corps was struggling without him as a teacher around. In his 80s, his last day of life, Yoriichi finally confronted his older brother, now called Kokushibo. Yoriichi died of old age in the middle of battle, just as he was about to unleash the killing blow. This only fueled Michikatsu's fury. Since he would no longer have the chance to surpass him, he attacked Yoriichi's corpse and found that he still carried the tiny flute with him after all these years. So, what came of Yoriichi's life and actions? Sadly, anyone who had learned sun breathing from him was hunted down by Muzan and Kokushibo. But on the plus side, multiple forms of breathing were created from the derivatives that Yoriichi had created, such as beast, mist, insect, serpent, love, flower, and sound. Sumiyoshi was able to successfully pass down the sun breathing in a subtle way through the Hinokami Kagura dance. And similarly, the Yoriichi Type 0 machine was created, wielding 3 swords to emulate the skills that he had while alive. With it, many Hashira were able to train and hone their skills for the final battle, including Muichiro Tokido. Even hundreds of years later, Muzan passed on the fear he felt in front of Yoriichi to the demons he created. That includes Daki on the roof when she was confronting an inflamed Tanjiro, and Hantengu's split forms in the Swordsmith village. Also, the scars that were left on Muzan's body helped to pinpoint the demon's weak spots after all that time. More personally, Kokushibo's defeated by the memories his brother left him in the end, knowing how sad he was seeing his demon form. On a more spiritual level, Yoriichi guides Tanjiro to use the true form of sun breathing that he originally created to defeat Muzan, and it helps him survive in the final battle. But even then, they required a group of fighters, Tamayo's help, and the use of other support items just to take him down. Unfortunately, it also requires more of the Hashira to die. With Tanjiro losing both an eye and his use of his arm for their victory, this, if nothing else, tells us that if Yoriichi had someone to help him get the 300 pieces that scattered, Muzan would have been destroyed centuries ago without all the casualties. And let's not forget, Tanjiro and his family wouldn't be alive if not for Yoriichi saving his ancestors back then. Far into the future, Yoriichi is reincarnated with his wife Uta, long after Muzan is defeated, and he, at last, can live peacefully with his love and his children without worrying about losing them to demons. And that was the story of Yoriichi Tsugikuni, who I consider to be the coolest character in Demon Slayer, if not the coolest character possibly in all of battle manga. But of course, it is subjective. But if you liked the video, guys, please give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe as well. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.